I think that is all of the other moving parts I need to worry about. So we get to shift into our Advent message. We're on week 3. And as we have been doing over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at, no, not week 3, I think it's the week that it is. Don't mind my notes. I work with letters, not numbers, and there's a reason for that. But we've been looking at instead of focusing on the nativity story that we read in Matthew's gospel and in Luke's gospel, we've been taking some time looking at some parts in the Old Testament, stories that were old at the time that Jesus was born, that kind of foretell or picture or anticipate the coming and the life and the ministry of Jesus. We are, in a sense, looking and we're seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. And we've looked at a couple of spots in Genesis, and this week I want to jump ahead to Exodus. And so if you have a Bible, you can turn to Exodus chapter 3, because I think there's the kind of thing that as I look at it, and again, I spend time chewing on this stuff for a week anyway or longer, and I have to remember that I think there's things that, in my experience, you see in the Bible, and as you look at them, it's like, well, yeah, that's very obvious. That should just be but it's not always. And so this is something that you might be like, well, yeah, I've seen that a long time. It might be, oh, this is kind of new. And I'm not trying to do funny things with the Bible and stretch it into weird directions to make it fit a sermon outline. But I do think that there are different elements of the story that we read in the Old Testament that do kind of prefigure Jesus. And one of them in the big picture is the story of Exodus. So there's a whole book, second book of the Bible is called Exodus, and it tells this big story of the Israelites, the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They went down to Egypt to escape a famine, and they sort of set up camp and stayed there. And then you fast forward 4 centuries, and there's a whole bunch of them as this sort of subculture living in the nation of Egypt, and they had been pressed into slavery, into forced labor to build things, and it wasn't a fun time for them, right? And so God had said He was going to rescue them and bring them out of there, and the story centers around a guy named Moses, and even people who are just barely familiar with the Bible, I think it's like, oh yeah, Moses, he was an important guy, wasn't he? The 10 Commandments and the parting of the Red Sea, and yeah, that's the guy. That's the Moses we're talking about. But I want to look at this episode in Exodus 3 that is sort of this pivotal moment. And I used as a working title for this sermon, The Sign, because we see Moses gets a sign, a well-known picture from the Old Testament story of a bush that's on fire but not being burned up. Since moving to British Columbia in 2018, I've got a new appreciation for plants on fire, right? In southern Ontario where we lived, we would get tornadoes. So we learned how to get warnings about those and worry about that and what to do if one is nearby. But we were never on, where I lived, we were never on like a fire watch or evacuation watch. It's like, get ready to drive somewhere that isn't on fire in case the fire gets too close to where you're living. That's an experience that, we take for granted out here, but not everyone. When we zoom into Exodus 3, Moses is living in a kind of a wilderness, a desert area in the Middle East, what we would call the Middle East now. Not a forested area. Forest fires were probably not a thing that they dealt with a ton. But we see this picture. And so I'm going to read through Exodus 3, and we're going to look at it in a few pieces, and I'm going to try to help us see where Jesus is sort of prefigured in this story. So Exodus 3 starts, it says, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, who was the priest of Midian. And he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. So I want to pause just there. That kind of sets the story, right? But I want us to notice a couple of things. When we read this, and especially if this isn't the first time reading it, we know Moses is a big deal, right? We know he becomes this key figure in bringing freedom to the people of Israel. But at this point, he was a guy with a father-in-law and like a pretty mundane life. He had grown up in the Egyptian court. He was a big deal, probably pretty educated, but he had to flee. He wasn't in Egypt anymore because they blew it way out of proportion. He murdered one guy, and it was aggravated, right? This guy was a slave driver beating a Hebrew slave, and Moses, who recognized that he was descended from these people, is like, hey, let up. And he's like, what are you going to do about it? And Moses showed him, and then, so here he is. So he's maybe got some cool stories in his past, but right now, he's living in the wilderness. He's married a girl. His father-in-law is an important guy, and Moses is leading the sheep around. He's leading the flocks. He had a regular job. And it says he led them to the west side of the wilderness. I mean, he probably had like a bit of a route, right? And even that, he comes to Horeb, the mountain of God, this place that had come to be seen as holy ground, but it was ground. It was a place. It's like, yep, I'm going to come to this mountain, and there's obviously enough plants here for the sheep to eat, but it's just an ordinary day. It's an ordinary guy doing what thousands of people in that day and age did. And we have this guy wandering into this holy area and seeing this thing, and we have heaven meeting earth on like a Tuesday. Like it's just a normal day, and he's like, oh, look, a fire. Oh, it's not burning up. It's just this curious thing. It says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in that flame of fire. And we talked about the angel of the Lord last week and how that's a term that gets used throughout the Old Testament. And it's not talking about like a normal angel. This is the presence and the manifestation of God. And many scholars say we are not incorrect to read that as the God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, Jesus pre-incarnation appearing in this fire. But at first, Moses doesn't say, oh, look, it's God. He says, oh, look, a bush on fire. Is this dangerous? Oh, it doesn't seem to be spreading. And somehow, I guess he was watching it long enough that he's like, this is not burning right? He's seen things burn. They burn up, and this wasn't doing it. And so he says, I will turn aside to see this great. I don't know if he said that out loud, although spending enough time in the wilderness with sheep, maybe. Maybe he said it to Fluffy. I'm going to go and check that out. You stay back. You're very flammable. But I'm just going to go. Why not, right? This is weird. He doesn't see there's not a lot of thrills out there, right? So it's like, yeah, you're going to check it out. This picture of a burning bush. And I remember in Sunday school, I remember as a kid thinking that's kind of a weird thing. Like God can show up any way that he wants. Why not just send an actual angel? But it's like, no, this desert bush, I'm going to light it on fire, but it's going to be weird fire. It's like, I don't know all of the reasoning and the thought behind it, but I think the burning bush is it's an odd thing. It got Moses' attention, but I think there's a lot of symbolism here in the picture of the whole Bible. For example, God's people are often described, the Bible uses illustrative or picturesque language. They're often described as a plant, as a vine, as a tree, as a plant of some sort. We see it in Judges chapter 9 and Isaiah chapter 5. John 15 talks about a vine and branches. And Israel's slavery in Egypt is described on multiple occasions as a furnace, both a refining thing, but just like not a good place to be. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 20, we see that. 1 Kings chapter 8, Jeremiah chapter 11. And so this burning bush is kind of like a picture of the people of God, a plant thrown into a furnace, but even though they were suffering, they were not burned up. They were miraculously preserved. So this picture of a burning bush, it's like, okay, and then where is God? The angel of the Lord is in the bush. He's in the flames. You have God entering into the fire, symbolically into the suffering of his people. He's not standing beside it, going, Moses, hast thou a fire extinguisher? Behold, my people doth suffer. He's in it, right? This is a clear picture of the incarnation. So Moses sees a bush, and he's going to check it out. Jumping in at verse 4, it says, when the Lord saw that Moses turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So this went from an interesting natural curiosity, something to talk to his wife and father-in-law when he comes out. You will not believe what I saw out on the west side there. This becomes a pivotal turning point in his whole life. God himself. So God got his attention, and we see that we learn a lot about God by what he says and does in this. God doesn't overwhelm him, right? It's like, I'm going to show up in this way that Moses will see and he will like approach to pay attention. Then he calls to him and he calls him by name. And it says the angel of the Lord, but it's interesting, right? In verse 2 it says the angel of the Lord appeared to him. In verse 4 it says when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, and that's using Yahweh, the proper name of God. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God, so that's using like Elohim, one of the generic names of God, called to him out of the bush. So the angel of the Lord is God, is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, present in the desert with the sheep and Moses. And he says this place is holy. And I don't think it's wise. Some over the years have I think maybe gone a little bit far in trying to build a doctrine about, where and where we should not wear shoes, if ground is holy and the degrees of that, and if shoes do so. We don't know. This was a cultural ancient Near Eastern sign of respect. Take your sandals off. The place you're standing is holy ground. And when Moses understood what he was seeing and whose presence he was in, it says he hid his face. He was afraid to look at God. He was acknowledging that this is God most holy, like you can't approach. I think it's pretty consistent all through the Bible when it portrays people coming anywhere near the presence of God. It is not merely overwhelming, although it is, but there seems to be this immediate sense of God's holiness, and by contrast, our really not holiness. Moses probably, we don't know, he wasn't necessarily wandering around the desert going, I am such a sinful dirtbag. Like, God must be so mad at me. I think he was just like counting sheep and watching for snakes and don't trip on a rock, right? He sees a bush. He's like, that's weird. When he realizes it's God, he's like, I can't look at God and survive. There's this instinctive response. And in case we were still going, but I don't know if that was God, I think that was maybe an angel. Moses acts as though it's God, and the angel of the Lord doesn't stop him and say, whoa, don't bow down, don't hide. It's just, I'm just a messenger. This is God present with him. God the Son, the pre-incarnate Christ there in the wilderness. And we see affirmation of this in different places in the New Testament. There's an obscure little book near the end of the New Testament called Jude. It's just one chapter. But in verse 5, Jude claims, he says, Jesus saved a people out of the land of Egypt. And he's not wrong, right? If we understand what the New Testament says about who Jesus is, it's like, yeah, this was him saving people. Moving on from verse 7 to about 12, I think we see a really, more details that just, it's painting a picture. If we know Jesus, it's like, this sounds really familiar. So verse 7 says, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? God said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Just want to pause there. There's elements of the way God describes rescue and redemption that we see this echoed in the way salvation came through Jesus. Right? If this is the God of the Israelites, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he says, I've seen their affliction, I've heard their cries, I know their suffering. And Isaiah 53, and we're going to be looking more at this well-known passage over the next couple of weeks, describes Jesus as a man of sorrows, familiar with suffering, acquainted with grief, not a God who's like, wow, that suffering seems awful. You little mortal broken people have to suffer? That's so weird. He knows it. He's come close. He's experienced it. God says, I know their suffering. I'm familiar with it. I've watched. I've heard. And he says, very crucially, I have come down to deliver them. Again, God has to adapt himself to us because we can't understand him. So I don't want us to get really hung up on up and down, but humans think like that. God is other, but when he draws near, it's like, yeah, he has come down. But if people are like, well, the Bible doesn't make sense because if it's up in the Middle East on the other side of the planet, he'd be down. But is that not? It's like, it's not, you can't get there from here. But he says, I've come from being far off, being transcendent, being remote. I have come near. That is the story of Christmas, of the Nativity. It's God coming near. God can't come near without making a lot of accommodations to our weakness. It'd be like trying to come near a snowflake, right? It's gone. It's like I can't even breathe on it. I have to, maybe if I had a long lens so I could see it, but if I get close enough to it, just my presence is going to just destroy it. God has to get small. He has to set aside so much of the glory that makes him God to come in a form that we can relate to. And here he accommodates himself to a little burning bush. The God who created all of the stars, right? The amount of burning power happening in all of there's not units that make the number any shorter than this. Right, when you want to talk about, well, how much energy does the sun release? How many stars in the galaxy? It's like, you don't have enough zeros. It's just so much. And he's like, I'm going to show up with that bush. Oh, you might burn the bush. I'm going to really just be very careful, right? Only God can accommodate himself. To become that small takes tremendous wisdom and power. But we see this in Jesus. He says, I've come down to deliver them, but he enlists human help. And we see this with Jesus when he starts his ministry, right? God says, I've come down and I'm going to send you. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring up my people. And then we hear Jesus in Matthew chapter 4 speaking to, as he's calling disciples, come, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Not just come with me, right? Hold my cloak and watch while I do really awesome stuff. That's part of it. But it's like, I'm calling you to come and do the saving. God has come among you to save, and I'm come alongside. He works through people that he calls. But he also says, when Moses is like, who am I? What am I going to do? God reassures him and says, I will be with you, right? So he comes down, and he doesn't just come down to recruit you, and you. Go over there and save those people. I'll be waiting, hurry up. It's like, don't worry, I'm with you. And we see that in Jesus' ministry when he calls the disciples to come follow me. It's like, I'll be with you. And when he leaves after his crucifixion and his burial and his resurrection, before he ascends, he goes, surely I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Like, I'm not leaving you alone. I've called you, but I come with you. And I think even in that sort of odd reassurance that we read in verse 12, right? Moses is like, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And I think part of that is humility, right? I'm just one guy, but God knows who he is. He called him by name. It's like, I'm not just like a normal guy. Pharaoh is like a king and I'm not. It's like, Pharaoh knows me and I'm a wanted man for my attempt to save Israelites. Like the last time I was there, I got run out of town like I'm fleeing for my life. It's like, who am I that I should go? Like, I'm the last guy you should send. They've got wanted posters of me there. I'm a little older now, but if they gray up the hair a little bit, they'll be like, I think that's him. God says, I will go with you. And he says, and here's the sign for you that I have sent you. After you've gone and done all of the stuff, you will come back and you'll worship me here. It's like, Moses, I think, if I can read my humanness into him, is like, could you give me some sign now before I go and risk my neck that you're with me? And God is like, here's going to be the proof. When you step out in faith and obey, and when everything turns out the way I'm promising you that it will, but you have no real evidence that you can see that it will, you'll be right back here. We're going to laugh about this. Like, right? The evidence comes after the obedience, which is not the way we like it as humans. Right? Like we learn that even as kids. If you have a sibling, there's a good chance that you said to them or they said to you at one point, close your eyes and open your mouth. Right? You might do it once and that, what is that? And they're laughing their head off and they put something that you shouldn't be eating in there, right? It was a cricket, whatever. You learn. It's like, here, I've got something. You want to taste something? Open your mouth. It's like, you show me first. Show me what's in your hand. Let me see and evaluate. Then I'll trust you. We would like that with God. I think that's the way as humans. It's like, if you want me to risk something, could I have some kind of assurance? And here God is like, I'm here talking to you out of a burning bush. You know that it's me talking to you. I get that you're scared. I said that I've gone with you. After you obey, it's like, oh, but surely Jesus would change that, right? I don't think he does. Like, when we read maybe the most well-known verse in the Bible, John 3:16, Jesus is explaining in a nutshell, God loved the world so much he sent his only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. It's like, once you believe in me, once you take that step of obedience, that risk of faith, well, then the proof that it was right will be that you get the thing I'm promising. It's like, that's not exactly the same as you giving me like a guarantee or anything. And God says, I don't give guarantees. I ask for faith. I make promises and I keep them. And we see this, so much of this coming near, calling people to rescue is the way Jesus operates. Then in this last kind of section, we see that there's a promise of rescue, not just of presence, but God explains what he's going to do. It says, then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, the proper name of God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you, and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice. And you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now, please, let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go, unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor and any woman who lives in her house for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, and in this way you shall plunder the Egyptians. So God gives some details here, and he makes some very confident statements about what's going to happen in the future, what he's going to do. He promises. God says, this is who I am. I am who I am. The whole plan revolves around who God is, around his glory and his character. God is, he's answering Moses' question, but the discussion rightly moves off of, Moses going, well, who am I? And Pharaoh's pretty powerful, and I'm really not. God's like, I am who I am. So it kind of doesn't matter who else is in the equation. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and it's going to be fine. And he says, go, gather the elders of Israel and tell them. He says, they will believe you. Oh, Moses is probably like, what if, who am I going to say sent me? Can you write me a note? I sent, right? Can I get a selfie with me in the bush? Look, this was, right? God's like, they will believe you. Oh, sounded pretty good for Moses. And God says, all right, so then you and the elders of Israel, you're not even alone. You're going to go talk to Pharaoh, and you're going to tell him I sent you. Moses is like, he'll listen too, right? No, he's not going to listen. It's going to be rough. He's not going to listen unless he gets shown. Very interesting, right? Because it's not spelled out, but as I put myself and maybe thinking the way we think, if we back up when Moses is first talking to God here and God's like, I want you to go do this thing, and the proof you're going to get that I'm telling you to do this and you're not just having a hallucination is after you step out and do it, you'll be back here, right? And it's like, I would like a sign. I would like some kind of proof. And it seems that there's a principle that shows up here, and we see it again in Jesus, where God's people get promises and they respond in faith. The people who demand signs get signs, but that's not the way God deals with his people. It's like, yeah, Pharaoh's he's not going to listen. He's going to be, I want proof. I will give him proof. But it's not like that's going to go well for him. Like if you read through the Exodus and, there's plagues and it's really rough. God's like, I can do proof. I can do signs, but they're not for my people. I deal with my people by promises, and they accept me by faith. I draw near to them, and I know their name. He won't believe you. I like the way it's like, he won't believe you unless compelled by a mighty hand. It's almost like, now where can we get one of I will stretch out my hand. Moses is like, I don't know, I'm right-handed. This one's pretty good. It's like, no. I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the things I'm going to do. It's like, I got a plan. I know how this is going to go. And he says, they will let you go. In fact, they're going to give you all kinds of loot to bring with you. You're going to plunder the Egyptians. You're not going to escape we distracted them and we all snuck away with just the clothes on our back, right? It's like, no, you went down as starving people with just the things you can carry. You're going to leave as though you conquered them. It's like, but we are captive there. It's like, no, you're not going to be. I'm going to change that. You're going to leave with your hands full. And this was promised earlier in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14, concerning Abraham's offspring. So way back, like Moses came well after Abraham, but when God was still talking to Abraham, it says, the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners or refugees, wanderers, in a land that is not theirs, and they will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. One of the patterns I think we see here is the idea of something small dying, but then coming back with greater glory than it had before. The idea of, Jesus says, unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it produces nothing. But if it does, it produces a crop. And we see it fulfilled in the Exodus story. Abraham's offspring, Jacob and his 12 sons, and some of them were married, had some kids, went down to Egypt. And they were like no one. And now it's like, oh, they've got all these descendants, but they're like the bottom of the social rung. They don't have freedoms. It's like, you're going to come out as conquerors. What looked like a grave is going to turn out to be a new birth. And we see this so much. Like this is it's all of these elements of what we see in the way Jesus rescues, the way God chooses to rescue his people. It's not, I'm going to show up with power at first, like it's just going to be nothing but win, win, win. It's like, no, there's this dying and then coming back. It's like, oh, this looks like we're losing. No, it's actually, that was the step to winning. I want to end with some practical questions. First, what about Moses? I think Moses often gets a bad rap in this story. And I stopped reading, at the end of Exodus 4, but it goes on like there's more of a conversation. And like Moses, he gets this divine visit from God, a clear mission to save God's people, assurances that God is going to go with him and do all the heavy lifting. And Moses essentially tries everything he can think of to get out of it, right? Send someone else. I'm weak. I don't speak real good. I'll be alone, right? And God is like insisting. It's like, I made your mouth. I've got this, right? Oh, fine. I'll send your brother with you and all of these things. And it's easy for us to kind of look down on him and think, well, man, if I saw a burning bush that wasn't burning up and God was speaking to me, I'd be like, clear my schedule. Nothing else matters. I think Moses is as human as the rest of us. But I think in this passage, Moses asks a couple of really good, really important questions. First thing he asks is, who am I? Who am I that you'd send me? Right? Moses had actually a fairly accurate view of himself in light of what God was asking him to do. Like if God showed up and said, Moses, I need someone who can get 200 sheep from here back over to Jethro's house. He'd be like, I'm your huckleberry. I got it. I do this all the time, right? It's like, I need you to go and like conquer Egypt. Right? Moses wasn't delusional. He had an accurate view of himself. He recognized that God didn't need his help and that he was utterly unequal to the task. He wasn't bringing something, God wasn't like, I've got this big plan, but I need your help. It can't work unless Moses, you're our only hope. Like it's not an Obi-Wan Kenobi moment. It's Moses. Moses understood God can save, he can't. So first he asks, who am I? Then he essentially asks, who are you? Moses was asking for God's name, right? When I go, who do I tell them sent me? It's a practical question. I need to report it to the leaders of the people. Whose name was he going and doing this in? You got to remember, Moses, he anticipated being asked, and the people of Israel were like just a small family group with a family history of God making promises to them. And they've been several generations now in Egypt. There were a lot of gods. You might have learned about them in school. A lot of them had cool animal heads, and they all have different names. So it's like when I show up and I'm like, God sent me, they're going to be like, you have to be more specific. Which God? God's like, no, I understand. This is what you're going to tell them. He was asking about God's name, but that attached to that is God's character. So God doesn't just say, here's my card. He says, I'm a God who hears. I'm a God who keeps promises. I'm a God who is mighty to save. I can do all of these things. And I think these are really important questions for us to ask as well. Right? Who am I? Who are you? How do we see ourselves? We are culturally and situationally so far removed from Moses standing in the desert in the ancient Near East with sheep and sandals and a burning bush that it's like it might as well be reading about someone on the moon. But we are in the same situation in that we have an idea of who we are. And when we come face to face with what God is saying to us, this is part of the question. Who am I? Who are you? Do we see ourselves as essentially self-sufficient? God coming to rescue, and it's like, no, I'm actually pretty good. That's very gracious. There's other people who could need help, but I've got this, actually. I'm doing all right. Are we able to save ourselves? Maybe we're so good we're able to help others. Maybe we're like, if we get a sense that God is saying, come, follow me, and we're like, well, I was waiting for you to show up. Watching you struggle, figure I know what he needs. You know what, God? It's your lucky day. I will join your team. Here's my pay demands, and I think we can work together. Do we? And that sounds. I'm saying it in a hyperbolic, cartoony way. Who would have the gall to believe they were talking to God and they could be that arrogant? We wouldn't, and yet I wonder if part of our wiring is that's kind of how we can see ourselves. Do we have this idea that, according or by way of our hard work or our good behavior or our good reputation or enviable heritage, or I've got a lot of material resources, are we confident? Maybe if we were to be honest in this story, we see ourselves more like Pharaoh than Moses. The Bible is clear that you don't want to be the Pharaoh in the story. God will show up with a mighty hand, but it doesn't end well. So who are we? And who is God? Moses asks, who are you? Who should I tell them who sent you? And we hear about God, and here we are thousands of years later, and we've got cultural and historical baggage tied to this idea. Who is God? Is he just a background idea? Is he one of many ideas competing for our attention and loyalty? Is he an obligation? Is he a part of your life, but not even, if you're honest, the most central or most attractive part of your life? Jesus asks these same questions. In Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 to 20, he's having a conversation with his disciples, and he says, who do people say that I am? Well, some say that you're maybe Elijah come back, or you're a prophet, and he's like, okay, what about you? Who do you say that I am? It's an important part of our relationship with God and his plan of salvation. It's like, what is our understanding of our place in all of this? Because we can have the wrong idea, right? Not to spoil the story of Exodus, because I know you're all going to go home and be like, I have to see how this turns out. But when Moses talks to Pharaoh and says, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has said, let my people go, he's like, I'm not familiar with that God. I don't even know that name. So no, get back to work, right? It's like he takes it's like I don't even recognize him. And he was being introduced, but he's like, I'm not to geek, I've got to know, like, don't chase this rabbit, but I'm going to a little bit because I don't have my timer running and I have ADHD. Part of what we understand about ancient Egyptian culture is that the Pharaoh wasn't just, I know a lot of gods. He was, in a sense, understood by himself and his people to be an embodiment of the divine. He's like, I'm just a guy, but I'm also the sun god, Ra. I am the one who brings life out of the ground. I control the Nile. I am the one that everyone depends. So it's like, you show up and it's like, this God says, and it's like, I know gods. I don't recognize this. We have to decide what we believe and who we say God is. There aren't any questions more important than these. Every single worldview and philosophy attempts to answer them, and without exaggeration, every single person here, every single person has an answer to these questions. We just maybe haven't thought about it and articulated it, but we have made some assumptions that we're operating on. The Bible tells us who we are. It says we've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. It says that Moses was wise to cover his face when he heard who was in the bush, because he, like us, is broken and sinful and can't even hope to approach God on equal terms. But the good news of the gospel, the good news that we celebrate and we sing about and we look forward to at this time of year, is that God sees, and then God in compassion draws near to save. The people of Israel were in slavery, and God is like, I've heard, I know, I see this. I've come near to save them through my people. And in the gospel of Jesus, we see the same thing. Not just for this little nation within Egypt, but all of us as fallen, broken humans are in bondage. We're locked up hopelessly in slavery to sin, to our own selfishness and sinful desires. Even when we try to do good, if we're honest, we're doing it for the wrong reasons. We can't help it. But God came to us. In the person of his son, Jesus, God entered into our suffering, right into the burning bush of our lives, so to speak. And he came to bring us out. And it cost him his life. His death is what we celebrate on Good Friday and Easter. And it cost him the humility of the incarnation. God being like, I'm going to be a newborn human baby. Like, I'm going to be a dust mite. That's just what I'm going to, right? It cost him a lot. But he came near to save. In the same way that Israel was predicted, God told Abraham, your descendants it's going to be 400 years. It's going to be rough. They're going to be in bondage. They were predicted to go into slavery, but to come out again with even greater glory. Jesus himself came and died. He was rejected and arrested and crucified and dead and buried. And it's like that seemed like it didn't work. But his death paid for our sins, and he rose again, defeating death and taking his stuff, taking the people who were captive to sin and death, and now he's raised to the highest place. So who is God? God can be your rescuer, freeing you with his mighty hand if you will give him his rightful place in your life. And that means, who are we? We can be the little Pharaoh of our life, but we can also be a rescued captive, a freed slave, a beloved child of God, if we turn to him in repentance and faith. Let me pray for us. Gracious Lord, we thank you so much for this time of year and all of the hope and joy that's tied up with it. And again, not because it's just a story about a cute baby. All the babies are cute. We have so many cute babies just even here in our church. But this wasn't just a baby. This was the mighty God, the Creator, the righteous King, drawing near to people who had fallen into slavery and had rejected him. That baby represents God with us, coming to us in a way that wouldn't destroy us by his mere proximity, coming to save us at great cost to himself. And Lord, I pray that once again today you would stir our hearts, that we, like Moses standing before the burning bush, would perceive you in the person of Jesus, and that we would not reject you. We would not decide that we're just going to go back to our sheep, but that we would recognize that when we are in your presence, we are on holy ground, and that we would step out in faith to be part of the amazing plan of salvation that you've been planning all along. Thank you for your love for us. Keep our eyes fixed on you as we continue the journey towards Christmas. In Jesus' name, amen.